All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Do Hard Things podcast. I'm your host, Jay Teagues, leadership trainer, coach, speak, venture coach, founder of the Do Hard Things Nation. Love to welcome you guys to another podcast. Happy Monday morning, and I have with me fellow certified high performance coach, Zach Morrell. How you doing, Zach?
Good morning. Doing really good this morning.
Man, how's your weekend?
Oh, it was pretty darn good. Got to enjoy some time with family, get out and do some active things, get out and bike ride and hike. So it was a good weekend.
Yeah, spring is starting to spring has sprung, if you will. I know here we had a really it was kind of rainy on Saturday, but Sunday was. I mean, yesterday was beautiful, just awesome. The trees are starting to change a little bit. You talked about the pollen starting to come out a little bit. You're a little congested this morning. I know my daughter's kind of suffering with that this morning, but yeah, it was just a wonderful Sunday. So hope you guys are having a great Monday morning. Hey, real quick, but in today's episode, we're going to talk about trauma. Like, what is trauma? How does it hold people back? And, there's a lot of people that suffer from trauma and they don't even realize it. So we're going to talk about, what is that? How does it work? How does it hold you back? And maybe give you some strategies or some tips that maybe you can incorporate in your life, or maybe someone that's struggling with it and you can give them some advice or coach them through some of that. But before we get into that topic, make sure you smash that subscribe button so you're notified of future episodes. This episode is sponsored by Lions Guide. Lions Guide is a growth agency. We feel that leadership solves most problems, and we empower everyday people to become world-class leaders. And, we have aligned the Forge. You may have heard me talk about the Forge community. We've aligned that with the Lions Guide, and we are getting ready to roll out the Forge 2.0, if you will, basically doing a big relaunch and of that community. And the Forge is a community of like-minded people, growth-minded people that focus on, that provides four things. We provide networking with other growth-minded people. We provide accountability because, look, life can be challenging and you may, ask questions. I see people ask serious questions online. They get laughed at or made fun of or whatever. You're going to find a tribe of people that can, have a serious conversation with. You're going to be challenged. We're going to issue challenges, and that's how you grow. And then ultimately providing frameworks and tools to help you navigate some of life's challenges. We provide research-based tools. We have weekly calls and a private community with teachings and trainings and a place that you can reference and connect with other like-minded people. So we'll be rolling it out. But if you go to lionsguide.com, you can check out what the Forge is. Like I said, we're going to be doing a big launch rebranding here shortly. And secondly, this episode is brought to you by UARD, the University of Applied Research and Development, where we're helping veterans obtain their bachelor or master's degree in emergency management. It's leadership and crisis management. I am an associate professor there. So we're looking forward to bring 100 veterans down in New Zealand to earn a degree and help them navigate to this dynamic career field where they can use their skills and training and ability and continue to serve in another capacity by providing leadership and crisis management. If you're interested in that, you can reach out to me directly. You can also go to UARD, www.uard.university. And then finally, if you love the mission here, you want to support what we're doing, we have some amazing swag. So you can go get yourself some Do Hard Things gear. Go to dohardthingsnation.com, get yourself some high quality gear. Show the world that you like to kick ass and take names. It's hard, when you're wearing a shirt that says disciplined on it, right? It kind of forces you to look in the mirror. You're like, you know what? I got to show up today, right? So it's good stuff. All right. So today we want to talk about trauma. We're going to talk about trauma. And I think there's four big things that can really hold us back in life. And it's trauma. It's these things that have happened to us in the past. It's anxiety. It's like worrying about things that could potentially happen in the future. Depression. And then ultimately financial issues. And it's going to be very difficult for you to have like tremendous success in life if one of these key areas are holding you back consistently. And it's, these are areas that a lot of us don't really want to talk about. We maybe want to avoid and push back, kind of suffer in silence. I have dealt with every one of these in my life. And, by leaning in and dealing with these things has ultimately led me to the work that, I'm doing today. But trauma is a big one, and trauma is one of the ones I want to kind of talk about today. And the American Psychological Association, the APA, just defines trauma as an emotional response to a terrible event. Trauma can occur once, or on multiple occasions, and an individual can experience more than one type of trauma. And commonly what is talked about is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and that is the mental health disorder that is associated when someone experiences or witnesses a trauma. Now, PTSD is thrown around a lot. I think that D is significant. That D is a disorder. That's on the far end of the spectrum. You can experience trauma and not have a disorder, and it can't affect you. Disorders where it's like truly, it's debilitating you, maybe from having a good quality of life or maybe employment, things of that nature. But I think a lot of us have been exposed to some type of trauma, and it does affect us more than we think. So, Zach, what do you think about the term trauma in your life?
Yeah, I mean, as far as trauma goes, I mean, it could be anything. I mean, really, for me, some of the most traumatic things in my life is just the loss of loved ones, both family and friends. But I mean, for everybody, it's something different, So I think that's kind of a big thing that we do have to realize is that everyone suffers in their own way and have had different experiences in their life where their trauma may be different than someone else's trauma, but it's all the same to them. It's still the worst thing that's happened to them. So for me, I'd say a lot of that is loss of family and friends.
Yeah, I think you made an excellent point that it's to the individual. Because I've had people where I've talked about trauma. It's like, I have this trauma, I had this thing happen to you, but it's nothing like what you experienced in combat. Like they're trying to downplay it in some way or try to make some type of comparison.
Oh, yeah.
And that is trauma is a bend in your reality, and it's something has occurred to you, and it's on there's no comparison to it, and it affects people in different ways. Trauma is trauma, and like you said, it could be a loss of someone in your family. It could be so some of the traumas that I've had in my life is physical and emotional abuse growing up. I've had combat situations. One that was really traumatic to me that was a bend in my reality was when I was a recruiter. One of my fellow recruiters brought a shotgun to work, and it almost became a workplace violence. And I that was such a bend in my reality. I couldn't fathom. That's usually what happens to trauma. It's like this thing has happened that you just could not even imagine, and it just like bends your reality, and it attaches these emotions to that particular incident. I think of like a car accident or some type of motor vehicle incident. Those are some of the things that I know I've experienced in life. And anything else come to your mind with you?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been some times with injury and things like that where to a certain level, yeah, it is traumatizing in its own way because it's it's something that just rocks your world. I know even when I was younger, stepping on a piece of glass in the creek and having a piece of glass about that big going to my heel, and having to walk 2 blocks home. I mean, that was pretty traumatic at the time,
Yeah.
I mean, it all kind of presents in its own little ways. Some people are a little, experience in one way and some experience in another. Some of us are blessed to not have quite as much trauma in our lives as others, but yeah, I mean, I think we're all suffering in our own ways. And really how are we dealing with that trauma? I think that's kind of the big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it results from exposure to an incident or series of events that are emotionally disturbing to you, whatever that is for you. And as a child, these things that we could be a little bit more resilient to. There's still traumas that have happened to you in the past, and they can still affect you to this day. You may not even realize it because it's in your subconscious. But it's a emotionally disturbing or life-threatening event with lasting adverse effects on an individual's functioning in their mental, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And trauma can make you vulnerable to developing mental health problems if left unchecked long-term. And it can ultimately lead to a disorder, which is, that like we talk about, PTSD quite a bit. And, some people, how they cope with that is they overuse alcohol to self-medicate, maybe drugs, self-harm. People that cut themselves or do things themselves to release the pain. That's how they cope with those difficult memories or those emotions. And, depending on how you're affected, trauma can affect a variety of different ways in your life. And many people are really unaware that they're suffering from trauma at all. They put the symptoms and their negative experiences down to stress, which is really vague and unhelpful. And what they need to do is try to get to the core of the problem so they can address it and move forward.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
that's
go
a good
ahead.
point. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just saying. I think that's a really good point because definitely when I was looking at the signs and symptoms of trauma, I mean they can be they're very similar to just kind of normal feelings throughout life as well. So I mean, like you said, it can be very easily overlooked that we've even had a trauma or that something's affecting us in that way because we like you said we can just write it off as well. I've got more stress at work right now, or I have this or that. That's why I'm more not getting as good as sleep. That's why I'm, feeling more anxious, more angry, having more outbursts and stuff like that. So it can be hard to kind of recognize when we've had that trauma and that we need to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it comes in a variety of different symptoms that we can easily overlook. But if you're
Hmm.
having like some reoccurring, like emotional, that the thoughts, like whether it be anger or sadness, or it's reoccurring, that's usually a warning sign. We'll get to some other signs here in a minute. But there are ultimately three types of trauma. There's acute trauma, and that's like a single incident. Let's when I think about the dude that brought the shotgun to work, kind of a thing. That's like an acute, like one time incident. There's chronic trauma, and that's repeated. So I think about like my childhood, with my father and some of the physical abuse and whatnot. That's chronic trauma. And then there's complex trauma, which is exposure to a variety and multiple traumatic events, often in an invasive and personal nature. I think about, combat deployments where you just have a variety of different things. You have the ongoing stress of things, and then you have a variety of things that are happening simultaneously in a short amount of time. And all of those things they're all issues that, if left unchecked, can cause you issues today, can cause you to not live your best life. You might have reoccurring emotions tied to these events that need to be addressed, and it's okay. I think the first thing that we need to do is acknowledge that we're humans, and that we try to that we don't want the ego to be like, what, I'm so resilient that happened to me, but I'm okay. I'm just going to stuff it away and not deal with the process the emotions. And that's because we haven't processed the emotions from the event is what causes us issues today.
Yeah, as you were thinking about that, I was thinking about even some work experiences that, as small as they may be, they do fit that example because it's where I'd find myself on the way to work and I'd hit a certain area, you kind of feel your mood shift. You
Mm-hmm.
kind of know that you're like, oh, I'm approaching work, like because something, an ongoing trauma at work, this kind of a bad work experience. So I've definitely had experiences like that in my life too, where I've noticed like, oh wow, like every time I'm around this area, I can feel my whole mood shift because
Yeah.
I'm getting closer to that place that I work that I hated going to every day. So kind of that repeat. But yeah, I didn't really think about it before until you're mentioning it there, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see it even in those small ways, those little things. I think when we think of trauma, we think it has to be big, but even those little instances at work, if it's something that's reaffecting you time and time again, even as small as just throwing off your mood just a little bit, I think that's something worth noticing and kind of addressing in that sense.
Yeah, there's something happening that is reminding you of a previous event, and it's your brain. Your brain is working. When you're engaged in that activity that's reminding you of that event, your brain is hijacking the event, and it's like preparing you. It's preparing that fight or flight. So it's causing that emotion to change. It's triggering that fight or flight response, and because your brain is just trying to go into self-preservation mode. And it's just a weird thing that's happening. You don't even realize it's happening. It's just your body is automatically going into that reaction mode. And that's that's the challenge of trauma. It's like these little things that we like, why are we like, it just puts your mood off, or just there's some type of resistance, and that's what's happening. And so it's like you've got this memory that's back in your on your your mind's a computer, right? And it's there, it's being triggered. Like there's something there that's kind of reminding you of that event and is causing these reactions. So
Oh yeah. Yeah, I
so
was even noticing it with some music at times, even around that, like certain music would come on and remind me of, work or something. Yeah. And it's like, oh wow, yeah, it's amazing how little things like that can pop up and trigger that response.
yeah, absolutely. And so that's an indicator that, there's something there that probably needs to be addressed. And when you have like when you know that you've had a traumatic experience, some of the easier indicators are you having a reoccurring flashback or nightmares of the unwanted distressing memories of traumatic incidences and reliving the events as if it were happening. Those are those upsetting types of dreams of the traumatic. Those are some indicators that you've got some trauma that you need to go and unpack. And severe emotional distress or physical reactions, can happen when you're triggered, because your mind is once again engaged in that fight or flight response to that unwanted event, and it's going back into that mode. But to your point, Zach, like I think a lot of times we have these like little things that we don't even realize that can put us in a mood, and because I think a lot more people suffer from trauma than you realize. And it's to that point, it's connecting those small things like that need to be taken care of.
Yeah, because I think it's something that can be easily overlooked because it's like, oh well, my boss chewing me out at work's not that big of a deal. Like, let's just get over it and move on. But I mean, if that's kind of some of the worst things you've experienced, some of the worst things you've experienced. It's not, it may not be comparable to something else, but that doesn't really matter. It's still, if it's pulling out that emotion, if it's making you, kind of hijacking your brain like that, well, then yeah, it's like you said, it's giving you that sign, letting you know, like, hey, there's something a little bit deeper to this.
Yeah.
And even though it may not be debilitating in itself, I think if you get a lot of those together at the same time, you're feeling this about work, you're feeling this about people you're around, you're feeling this about, all these little events in your life, I think eventually it can build up to be something bigger when it's all added together like that, just all those micro experiences.
Yeah, you talk about like getting chewed up by your boss. That might sound silly to someone, listening, because like, oh, it's not a big deal to me. But for some other people, it can be. And why would that be such a traumatic experience? Why would that trigger that? Well, because what could have happened is, as a child, you may have gotten chewed out by an adult for the first time, and it was such a traumatic event that your mind didn't quite process it. You weren't expecting it as a child, and you didn't process the emotion effectively. And so now every time that you have that, you want to avoid conflict because of that event, and then you end up becoming a people pleaser. And this is a common thing that happens to a lot of people, but it's probably from an event that happened in childhood that you're taking harshly now, more so than the average person. And those are the things that have to get dealt with. You have to go back in time and kind of deal with those things to detach the emotion from those events, because that's what's happening with people. It sounds silly, and but that's what your mind does. It's up to the individual how trauma occurs and how your mind attaches the emotion and how it deals with it. But it's stuff like that we don't really think about. But there's a domino effect that's happening in your over the span of your life. All right. So ultimately, recovery from trauma is possible with time and treatment. And, we need to learn some healthy mechanisms to cope with that. But the first thing that we have to do is acknowledge that, trauma is a culprit in our life. It exists. There are things that have happened to us. So acknowledging that trauma has happened to it. And then the second critical thing is accepting support, like, acknowledging the trauma and accepting that, I need some help beyond myself, maybe going to see a therapist or, identifying a variety of different coping mechanisms, modalities. And then, practicing self-care. So that way you can, when I practice self-care and I'm doing, like, when I'm really on it, like with meditation and working out, I feel like I'm more resilient, and I can tackle these things and keep them in check far easier. What are some of the things that you think of, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, for me, really, exercise is kind of the biggest one for me. It's definitely helped me out a lot, because I definitely used to, in the past, I would gear more towards going towards alcohol or, along that lines. And, really, I found that through exercise, I can get the same effect. But, I don't have all the extra baggage that comes along with, drinking and, So really, exercise is the biggest one for me. I found that that's helped me get through more things than anything else. Exercise, that and eating right. Honestly, I can tell the difference in my moods, and the way that I'm able to handle things. Like if I've eaten wrong and I've been, drinking for a few days in a row or something like that, I can feel that like my mood's a little snappier. My overall ability to process and just experience joy is down. Like it's harder to find that joy. So really kind of keeping clean in that sense with the exercise and a good diet really have made a world of difference. And I can tell it now when I'm not in that zone, not eating right, not sleeping right, not doing those right things for myself.
Absolutely. So well, going back to sleep, like sleep is critical to processing emotions. So when things have happened to you, getting into that REM sleep cycle, the REM sleep cycle is how your mind defrags these events that have happened to you. So say you get in an argument with your significant other, and you have that emotion, that just maybe you're angry, maybe there's some sadness, maybe, all those negative emotions that go along with it. It's the REM sleep cycle that helps you kind of like take that and process those emotions, and you process them much quicker, so you don't have the emotion nearly as long. And when it comes to trauma, we need good sleep, and obviously good
Oh yeah.
food and exercise helps you with brain health and function and things of those nature. And a common thing that people do is they self-medicate, with alcohol, with drugs. Maybe they engage in like escapism activity, like an overindulgence of video games and Netflix binges and things like that, right? It's a form of like just keeping your brain kind of active, but it's in a negative way. It's just a distraction.
Oh yeah. Well, and if you look at each and every one of those items too, they all come back and they mess up other things too. So if you're drinking too much, you're probably not eating right. You're probably not sleeping as right. You're staying up later, sleeping in later. Same thing with video games, overindulgence. I mean, all of it kind of like has that snowball effect where it's like one little thing becomes a big thing after a while. So at least I know that happens to me, kind of when you fall off,
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can either let that snowball keep getting bigger or you can, get back on. But
look for all of us, and we're pretty health conscious, and we have a community of people that are, but it ebbs and flows, right? Like you just got done with 75 hard. You recently said, I've been slacking a little bit. I kind of go in those cycles. It's hard. We're not robots. We're not on all the time, but being around like-minded people kind of gets you back on the bandwagon quicker, more often, enables you to pivot more often. And having that accountability is key. So, because it's very difficult, but like you said, when you're on your health and fitness, wellness A game, like, man, life just seems so much easier, so much better, have so much more energy. So I would agree with you there.
I like that you mentioned, having that community, because I think that is a big aspect of it too. Because I mean, it's kind of our first nature, like when we're experiencing something, to want to kind of push away.
Yeah.
But it's really having that community and those people around us that are checking in, that are encouraging us to keep moving forward. I think that's so important, because it is much easier just to shove everything away and say, all right, I'm gonna deal with this myself. But what you find is that strong people around you, more than likely they've been through something like you, or and can help you through it, as opposed to just trying to push away and take care of it yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I think, there's a lot of people out there suffering in silence. I certainly did, because ego and maybe my position at work, I can handle this. Right. So I had that stuff happen to me. That makes me a stronger person. I'm gonna tap into that. Right. But ultimately we need to deal with those things, and having a place where you can talk about these things, having a community and friend pool is so incredibly important. And I think those people that are suffering in silence and ultimately, take their life, they just don't feel like they have a place that they can talk to people. And I think having a space like that is so incredibly important.
Absolutely.
So I know in the veteran community, suicide across the board is high. And I think, social media pressures is how society works. I think they're just avoiding talking about these difficult things in their life. And I think that we need to have a place that we can lean in and have that space to talk and acknowledge that, hey, you know what, we're all a little bit broken, and we all need some help. And, that's one thing when we, in the Forge, conversations is, the common thing is, what, at the end of the call, we're always like, okay, what did you take away from this session? It's always like, what, it's just nice to know that I'm not alone. It comes up every single time.
Oh,
it's just nice to know that I'm not alone, because you think that you are, and you're not. And if you think that you are, then you need to, I don't know, that's an indicator that you need to look at your accountability pool. Are you in the right place? Are you around the right people? Do they know? And
because most of our interactions, especially online, are very superficial.
Absolutely.
So to have a group of friends that you can have deeper conversations with, that you can share those emotions with, is essential. I mean, because you're not going to see that online. If you go to look for your issue online, more than likely you're just going to get more grief back. I mean, because most people aren't sharing those things on their Facebook. And a lot of people, it's much easier to be a troll than to share your emotions back when someone's sharing theirs. So I think kind of looking for that support in just a normal online community like that is not necessarily the right place to look. It's looking for people that are kind of all working towards the same thing, kind of like we're doing with the Forge and things like that. I think you get a much better experience that way, because it's people that you're having those deep conversations with. It's not just that superficial.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So bottom line is, if you've experienced some type of trauma, just encourage you to acknowledge it and encourage you to accept some type of therapy to unpack that. Now, I am not a therapist. I am a certified performance coach and leadership trainer. One of the modalities that I've been certified and trained in is from 22-0, which is a fantastic organization that's helping first responders and veterans, deal and cope with traumatic experiences. And I'm certified in the trauma resiliency protocol, the TRP process, and the emotions management process. And it's a form of neuro-linguistic programming that's designed to interrupt the fear and terror and helplessness of traumatic memories. And the great thing about this process is you don't have to explain the traumatic event to me. It's just a little sequence that we do to help you detach the emotion from the trauma. I ran through the process with someone over the weekend that's had anger management most of his life. And in that session, in 90 minutes, they immediately feel like the weight of the world off their chest. It's hard to explain how it works, but it absolutely works. And we detach that memory. You let your REM cycle go back and process it. So we kind of go back in time, and like we said earlier, you have that, every time that I get around my boss, I'm scared he's going to chew my ass, right? Well, what we do is we go back in time and okay, let's get to the root of the problem, and let's address all of those incidences, the dominoes that have been falling all of your life, and address those and detach that emotion. And then what happens is your brain is composed of three parts: the hippocampus, I don't want to go into neuro, but basically three parts. And because we're coming up on time as well, your brain's like a hard drive, and we're just doing the defragging process is what we're doing. We're removing it from your REM and putting it back into the hard drive somewhere. It's not like the Men in Black where we're erasing the emotion and the memory, right? We're detaching the emotion so that event doesn't own you. And the event is still yours, but the emotion doesn't own you. And that's what's great about that process. So anyway, if you'd like to learn more about that, if there's any way that I can serve you, please feel free to reach out. So, all right, we're up against the clock here. So that's a really deep dive and overview of trauma. And hopefully that the topic has served you or helps you in some capacity. But we'll transition now to my favorite part of the week, is acknowledging and celebrating our weekly wake up winner. And hey, sometimes we have multiple, the same person might win multiple times because this individual has won before, and that's okay, because we want to acknowledge when people are kicking butt and taking names. And so I'm completely motivated and inspired by my friend Melissa Martinez, who just ran another 100 miles over this weekend. She spent, it took her 27 hours. And you might recognize Sherry Wilson and her wonderful husband, Larry, because they've also been Do Hard Things Nation winners in the past as well. But Melissa Martinez, she works for the Pulaski County Health Department, and she's the organizer of One Sole Purpose. A lot of her running events, they donate a pair of shoes to children in the school districts. They've donated, I don't know how many thousands of shoes to kids in school. She's a vlogger, she's a runner, she's a podcaster, all around amazing person. One of the nicest people that I know. And this over the weekend, she crossed the finish line at the Prairie Spirit Trail 100. So 100 miles, which is a freaking amazing accomplishment. So, Melissa, we appreciate you. Thank you. Keep doing hard things. And you are this week's Do Hard Things Nation winner. So, all right, Zach, I hope you have a wonderful Monday.
I hope you do too.
I plan on it. I got action-packed day. About to take my kids to the doctor, and yeah, it's gonna be good. I'm going through my recertification this week for high performance coaching. It's an annual event, so I got to go through that this week. So I'm pretty stoked about that.
Oh yeah,
but
I'll be doing mine later this year.
Yeah, sounds good, brother. Well, hey man, for everyone else out there, we appreciate you. Zach, any final words?
Hey, if you need anything, just reach out. We're all here to help everyone. It's definitely when we're dealing with trauma, we need to have other people around us. So, it's definitely something we need to all rely on each other. We're all here for that reason. So, hey, it doesn't always have to just be happy and growth. If you need help in other places as well, we're here to help. So
let's face it, life is hard. And, you need a tribe, you need a team of people to navigate it. We're humans. We're natural. That's part of our biology is to be, in some type of tribe. Is your tribe the right tribe? Do you have the right people? Do you have the right support out there? The Do Hard Things Nation, we're just, we want to instill that sense of camaraderie. So we have the Do Hard Things Nation Facebook page. If you want to go a little bit deeper, do a deeper dive and get really connected with people, you can join the Forge. And, so you can listen to podcasts, you can read books, and that's great. But if you really want to accelerate to the next level in a much faster pace, it's almost like you're on the highway of personal growth and development. You ever been like in a traffic jam and you have that like lane in the middle, like in the big cities, and you can like get on that lane, the express lane, if you will? That's what the Forge does for you. It's like the express lane in your personal growth and development journey. You can get to your journey. You can get to your endpoint much faster through accountability.
Oh, yeah. But you got to have people in your car to get in the lane.
Absolutely. That's right. You're absolutely right. You got the HOV sign or whatever. You got to have like 3 people or you get a big ass ticket. So, so yeah. So join us in the HOV lane, join the Forge. If you'd like some information about that, let us know. And hey, have a kick-ass Monday. Have a kick-ass rest of your week. And as Angie would say, do something that makes you smile. Have a great one, everybody. See ya.